I want to welcome some folks who are going to talk about key secular related programs that are out there. And there may not be all necessarily secular, but there's certainly related communities that we all should know about and want to consider engaging with. I'm going to start by introducing Karen Stoyanoff. Karen is with the Unitarian Universalist churches. She's an affiliated community minister of the Fullerton Unitarian Universalist Church. You're going to just give us a sense of where this connectedness is, clarify some misconceptions people might have about the UU system, and then we're going to move into discussion on secular Jewish communities, a discussion on the secular Latinos of San Gabriel Valley, and I'm going to give a brief overview of the United Nations Association. So Karen, are you with us?
I am with you, and thank you so much for including Unitarian Universalism in this program. I feel very honored that you would think of us, and I'm happy to tell you a little bit about us. We are a faith tradition. We welcome everyone, and that very definitely includes atheists. So as a result, we don't have a set theology or a book that tells us a story from ancient times. Faith to us means having a strong belief in someone or something. And I did take that definition from the dictionary. For some who choose to join with us, it might be a faith in something mystical, but that's not the usual thing. Indeed, it's not true for most of us. The belief in someone, like each other, is much more true to what we share. And the belief in something, well, that's a bit more esoteric, but it boils down to things like justice, joy, or love as elements in the world that make for a good society. These are the things we work toward and talk about in our meetings and services, because yes, we do have services that include music, meditation, fellowship, and a message about life as we are living it. And I think we can easily be considered secular. Tomorrow, my congregation in Fullerton, California, is putting on a musical with members of the congregation who are singers presenting various popular music. And that's our Sunday service this week. Of course, we do have some rules, or perhaps it's better to call them suggestions for how we might best make our way through life. We have what we call 7 principles, and they are things that the UUs created about 50 years ago, and we frequently look at them to see if we want to change them. Recently, many congregations have added an 8th principle. There's nothing magical or mystical, but rather they're human-made. They are probably the best, fairly short answer I can give you about Unitarian Universalists. Number 1, respect for the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And I can tell you, I struggle with that sometimes, but I do struggle with it. I work to find a way to have respect for every person. Number 2, justice, equity, and compassion in our human relations. That one's easier for me. 3, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth. And I'm going to say, whatever that means to each individual. Spiritual may mean simply appreciation of nature, appreciation of the fact that we're alive. It doesn't have to mean something that sounds like more traditional religious beliefs. Number 4, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And I think this one's important because we don't presume, I don't, nor does any other UU minister presume that we have a lock on the truth. And all our members are encouraged to figure out, to find, to search for what truth is in their lives and in what it means to them. Number 5, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process. And that's why our principles are voted on by our delegates, our own Congress, in other words. No small group gets to decide them. No individual gets to decide them. They're voted on by all of us. Number 6, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Because we want to reach beyond ourselves and our own community. We think the whole world is part of what we ought to be about. And number 7, respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. The other day, when I went to brush my teeth, there was a spider in my bathroom sink, and I deliberately found a way to brush my teeth and not kill the spider. I can't tell you that I've never done anything to an animal, or I am not a vegetarian. I'm a meat eater, an omnivore, but I don't deliberately kill other living things. So recently, as I said, many of us have added one more because we don't think it's covered fully enough in the first 7, and that is working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and the other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. So we not only go speak at government meetings and get out and march and stand with groups of people, we work on what's going on internally in ourselves. We are also strong supporters of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We think that we have to go beyond our community. We invite our members to be active in their community, but also in the world at large as part of living out these principles. And basically, because we do not prescribe to a specific theology, we concentrate on humanism in our work or talks and our thinking. As I've gotten to know more and more humanist individuals and organizations, I've realized that Unitarian Universalists are humanists. I also secretly think that an awful lot of humanists are Unitarian Universalists, but I wouldn't lay that on anyone that felt they didn't want to. We do actually have a humanist UU association, and the president of it is Reverend Dr. David Breeden, and he and I went to seminary at the same time. So I know David, but we're kind of across the country from one another, so we haven't been interacting recently. There are UU congregations throughout the country and also the world. There are 5 right here where I live in Orange County, California, and many more in the greater Los Angeles area. We work for justice in each of those congregations, sometimes partnering with other groups, and we would love to know all of you better. You would be welcome to join us for any of our activities, and we would welcome an invitation from any of you to join with your justice work. In Orange County, we've been active supporting LGBTQ people and causes. We are deeply concerned about climate change, and we abhor marginalization of any group, be it because of race, ableism, religious preference, or a myriad of other discriminations. We have concerns about poverty, hunger, homelessness, and other misfortunes that beset people, including ourselves, from time to time. So I hope I've sparked an interest in some of these things, and that you will contact, some of you at least, will contact your close by Unitarian Universalist congregation in the near future. I guarantee you there's one wherever you are, if you're in the United States. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Karen. And, you know, it reminds me that Michael Warner, our very first speaker today, was the former vice president of the Unitarian Universalist Humanist Association. The American Humanist Association, formed in the 1940s, I believe, really came from the Unitarian Universalists. They are the roots of many of our organizations. And as I've looked into it and tried to understand where are we different, we are by far more similar than we are different. And it just seems like it would be in everybody's best interest to try to work together more. So again,
I would say, as I've listened this afternoon, that we have a lot of people who come to us for the same reasons that they go to you. I think the reason someone might come to us is because they want a community. They want the things that whatever they grew up with, they got in terms of community.
Right.
And they still want to talk with other people and think about what's the meaning of life.
Exactly. Thank you again so much. And I'd like to now turn it over to Bev Zarnow with the secular Jewish community in San Diego called Kahal. Bev has been an active member of the SoCal Secular Coalition, and we really appreciate you being here, Bev.
Oh,
So
thank
take it
you.
away.
Thank you very much. Celebrating Jewish history, culture, and ethics without God. I'm going to explain how that works. It's an interesting position to be in, following the translation projects in the Clergy Project and the Humanist Celebrants and the Unitarian Church. It's kind of an evolution as I see it. So let me explain how this works for secular, dedicated people. How can you be Jewish without God? This is what we hear all the time when we are meeting with folks out in the public. Well, we put God in its place. We put God in a place where it is a historical concept, it's an outdated concept, an all-powerful God isn't really valid in our rational world. And I know I'm speaking to people who already believe that. So that's why we call it Judaism beyond God. We have evolved from ancient days when priests were in charge, people were ignorant, they didn't understand where the rain was going to come from, so they needed a power figure to explain their world, and we've moved beyond that. What I want to explain to you is that Judaism is more than a religion. When you think of religion, you think of a very stagnant kind of dogma. And really, a religion is just a set of beliefs. Well, the Jewish people as a people are beyond that, because we have a 3,000-year history of people developing Jewish culture through music and language, through literature and other folk traditions. We have a 3,000-year history of people who are bound through adversity and achievement. And Jewish ethics that are a part of the belief system. Jewish ethics for secular Jews are based on human experience. They come from a sense of causality and a consequence. And we think of religion as telling us how we're supposed to behave. Well, we don't need outside force to do that, because we can see it in the empirical world. The organization that I lead, Kahal, the Humanistic Jewish Community of San Diego, first started in 1985 in San Diego when Rabbi Sherwin Wine, who's featured here on the left side, attended meetings with the Humanist Association of San Diego, and he was invited to meet some people who were just interested in how Judaism and humanism could fit together. Rabbi Wine himself started this movement in 1963 in a suburb outside of Detroit, Michigan. He was an ordained Reform rabbi, but he was influenced by the ideas of the Enlightenment and was really developing his view of Judaism in his first book, Judaism Beyond God, which I have, which is, I don't know, it's about a half-inch thick. And later he really refined those ideas, and his book grew 3 times to over an inch thick. In 1985, these are some of the beliefs that the first group of 10 people said. And I'm going to quote them. I'm telling you this because I think this will help you understand the dedication that these Jews had to secular humanistic philosophy. They said, quote, "We are a secular organization. We do not invoke the name of a deity or supernatural force, nor do we believe that there is any intervention in human affairs by a supernatural force. They said, because we are a secular organization, our services and any rituals that may evolve will not contain worshipful language or any worshipful reference to a deity. And finally, among their statements, this sums it up. We believe in the dignity and self-esteem of human beings. So how are humanistic Jews different from other humanists? First of all, combining humanism and Judaism is a very natural pairing because the real experience of the Jewish people is that there is a necessity in their history and their life experience that has always required them to take charge of their own fate. Jewish history, more than any other kind of national history, showed people taking charge of their own experience and their own consequences. Identity is important because Jewish identity is where people come to this movement, because humanists who want to experience their ethnicity but are no longer feel a significant connection to conventional or theistic religion feel comfortable celebrating their Jewish identity. Authenticity is a key. We believe that science and humanist philosophy make it impossible to honestly maintain a conviction in traditional Jewish beliefs. We're not buying it. We have to feel that whatever we say and do is authentic to our ethical system. We believe that we need evidence to prove whatever we know to be true. And that's a very secular point of view. And finally, our ties are not only to the Jewish community, but to all people in the world who would try to live with dignity and respect for others. I know that, I think it was Karen who said, we have services. Well, my view of services is that who are you serving? Now, you can say you're serving other people, but traditionally services meant serving God. Our view is that we celebrate all kinds of people. We celebrate to affirm our shared beliefs and to reinforce our community bonds. As you see in this picture of this Havdalah ceremony that we gathered to do at the end of the Jewish Sabbath, which is on a Saturday evening. And it wasn't about blessings to a deity, but rather empowering each other by sharing our hopes for a sweet and good week ahead. I put the Efo Ori up here for people to look at. It's the anthem of our movement written by Rabbi Wein. Efo Ori, where is my light? Ori be, my light is in me. Efo Tikvati, where is my hope? Tikvati be, my hope is in me. Efo Kochi, where is my strength? Kochi be vigambach, my strength is in me and in you. So bringing that sense of community together. Our celebrations affirm the importance of being an individual. We have a balance between what works for society and works for ourselves, and those need to come together so that we feel empowered as a human being. That's why we say that celebrations serve people, not gods. And in our celebrations, we talk about humanist values, we talk about Jewish identity, we talk about our culture, celebrate the music and the literature of the Jewish people, and people who are humanistic. We celebrate world holidays, participating in, for example, the UN Day that we did recently, and then in our celebrations, we also have recognition of personal life cycles. Some people say, how can you be spiritual if you're just focused on rationality? Well, there is a spirituality that fits, and it's naturalistic. It comes from the material world, and the material world can be inspiring. It can generate passion that gives us meaning in our lives, and that's a sense of spirituality, a sense of transcendence of ourselves to fit in the rest of the world. Not beyond the world, not into some metaphysical space, but with each other. Participating in social justice and tikkun olam, which is an expression in Hebrew that means improvement of the world, that develops hope and a feeling of personal efficacy. The picture on the left is when we were at the Earth Day Fair, and we're planting seeds and helping these young people to be able to appreciate the sense of growth in our natural world. Acknowledging the beauty of nature and human creativity produces a sense of joy. There's nothing more joyous than this picture that I put up that was a painting from one of our members. Acknowledging that beauty. And then experiencing human connection. The bottom picture is a Hanukkah celebration as we were together of all ages and ethnicities who are identifying as Jewish. And that connection is what others have talked about, that people come to join groups to have that warm feeling, that sense of security, that sense of belonging, that knowing where your place is, to have not just your identity as a member of a family or a peer in a work situation, but actually having a sense that you belong to an extended family that meets your values and your needs. A spirituality that acts to advance ideals such as love and freedom, peace. Those loftier goals bring an expansive sense of possibility that is exhilarating. And that's our definition of spirituality. What about Israel? The big question is always up there. I will say that we support the right of Israel to exist and protect its citizens. We advocate for an end to terrorism and feel outrage at the loss of lives throughout Israel and the Palestinian areas that are as a result of terrorism. The picture at the top is to represent the fact that we support a just two-state resolution to ensure the health, safety, and prosperity of Palestinians and Israelis. The picture on the left, I wanted to share the beauty of Israel. This is the Sea of Galilee, the Lake Kinneret. And the picture on the right, the political reality of living in two worlds with a huge fence separating them. On the left side, the Jewish East Jerusalem neighborhoods, and on the right, the Palestinian West Bank town of Abu Dis. Okay, we're critical of any efforts to deny full rights of citizenship to all the citizens of Israel. And in Israel, the movement of secular humanistic Judaism is slowly growing with 25 ordained rabbis. Finally, questioning is in Jewish DNA. As you see in this quote from Rabbi Hillel, questioning is what brought me to humanistic Judaism because I'd never found satisfaction in the theistic liturgy or traditions. And that's how I became a madracha, which means leader, an ordained leader. I studied for 5 years on long weekends to get to this point. Is there a God? It's not a relevant question to answer. We choose to celebrate what we can confirm. We welcome anybody into our community who identifies with the history, culture, and future of the Jewish people, whether you are originally Jewish or not, whether you have started out as a very Orthodox Jew and turned, whether you're a Jew of color. There are 30 secular communities throughout the United States, 9 communities in the world. 6% of the Jewish population identifies as secular. We're a small organization, but if you're interested in Kahal, I'll put our website into the chat for you. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. And it's just, again, something that up until kind of recently, well, the last few years, and we've been working together. And I think at our first leadership summit, when we had someone join from a secular Jewish community in LA, I really wasn't aware of the extent of the secularism within many of the Jewish communities. And it's just great to know, again, that we've got so much in common and, love working together. I want to introduce Louie Campos to talk about the secular Latinos of San Gabriel Valley. Louie, thanks so much for being with us and representing. I know it's more your wife's group, that has really started it and everything, but she's unavailable today. Thanks for pitching in. We appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much, Dave. I'm really pleased to be here. I want to start off by saying I'm coming to you today from Tongva land, this land that we're at in the San Gabriel Valley. The traditional stewards of it were the Tongva peoples. They did not give up this land. It was taken from them. And with that, I'm here representing the secular Latinos of San Gabriel Valley. It was a group started in 2018 by my wife, Arlene Rios, right here. She had started a similar group in Fresno County in the Central Valley called Fresno Latino Atheists. I'm going to share a link to their meetup page, as well as an article at the LA Times. They were featured on the front page of the LA Times right at the beginning of the pandemic. But it's an interesting read. It talks about the secular Latino community in Southern California. And then I'm also going to share with you an article from 2014 by Sakivo Hutchinson talking about atheism's problem with discrimination and race. And I'm going to be moderating one of the rooms later on activism or advocacy. That is one of the areas that I've actually been working with for the past over 20 years. I'm an advocate. And one of the things that advocate does is they take space for other groups, marginalized people who feel that their voices are not being heard. While everybody that's been here speaking and all the people I know here, I have a lot of respect for, I was disappointed that when we talked about the secular community going forward into the future, nobody of color was in that group. The Southern California area is largely Latino. We are the largest ethnic group, and there was no Latino faces there. So I would like to suggest that going forward, that gets remedied. If you want people of color to come here, you got to go where people of color are. And with that, I'm going to turn it over back to the rest of the group. Thank you.
Thanks, Louie. And I hear you, and I think you're right. And so we appreciate the input, and I think it's a challenge that all of us recognize, and it's nothing that any of us don't want to fix. So any help that we can get from yourself and others, we're definitely wide open to that, because as has been mentioned so many times, we really do believe, and Karen mentioned as well, the UUs, we are all about inclusivity. We are all about it. But for whatever reason, we're not there yet. So I agree with you. So anyway, thanks. So I'm going to just give a little presentation on the United Nations Association and why I've become so sort of enamored with this group as a result of my commitment and passion for the secular movement. I grew up overseas. My parents were actually missionaries, evangelical missionaries in China, Japan, Taiwan. I grew up in Taiwan for a dozen years through high school. I knew about the United Nations like many of you, but ever since being here, I mean, it doesn't get that much play. You hear as much negative probably about it and derision as you do positive, especially in the U.S. And I had never heard of the United Nations Association. And what I find is most people haven't. So if you haven't, you're not alone. I was really pleased to find out that there was this organization that is in all of our communities. There are actually 200 chapters in the U.S. We've got a dozen chapters here in Southern California. I'm just going to go through sort of what drew me into it and why I think it's so important for us going forward. And it really comes down to something that's been mentioned several times here, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is the founding document for the UN. The UN, of course, was founded in 1945 after World War II. Franklin Roosevelt got it going, and then he died right prior to its launch, and Harry Truman took over. But his wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, became our first ambassador, the first U.S. ambassador to the UN, and her first act was to create, along with a few other world leaders, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. What's important about this document is that it's got 30 basic human rights in it. Then if you look at them and go through them, we're all born free and equal with rights to our own thoughts and ideas, freedom from discrimination, the right to life and to live in freedom and safety, no slavery, torture, etc. You just go down the list. What does this remind you of? It reminded me of humanism and of our values. In fact, what I found out is that many of these human rights came from the Humanist Manifesto that was originally developed in the 1930s. She was a fan. And so this has become sort of a baseline document for the world to come to agreement on issues. And if you look at these 10 commitments from the American Humanist Association, this is their recent model, you can see that all of these items pretty much fall in to a bucket in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is the most translated document in the world. And, I don't think it gets enough play. So I'm interested in bringing that awareness up more because once we can agree on these basic rights, then it makes it a lot easier to agree on what the issues are. And then we can have debate about maybe how to solve the issues. But the other thing that's happened, and you can notice the similarity between the symbol here of these 17 Sustainable Development Goals for the world and the AHA's symbol of their 10 commitments, and I think this came first, but, is that in 2000, the UN set about to say, we need to establish goals for the world and get people actually working on these goals. And they set out 8 goals. And it was basically the first 8 goals here. We got to end poverty, end hunger, provide good health and well-being for everybody, quality education, gender equality, etc. And they said over a 15-year period, 2000 to 2015, we're going to set targets and we're going to start monitoring our progress as a world body. And we're going to have people creating metrics and going out and seeing how we're doing. And at the end of the period, what they found, and they started selling this model to folks and getting people on board with it, was that in fact, poverty was reduced in half worldwide. Hunger went down. There was a lot of progress that got made. And it's sort of the old axiom, how do you measure success unless you have a metric, unless you have some way to measure it? And this is really the idea here. So when we got to 2015, they said, let's go do this again, another 15-year period, 2015 to 2030. And we're going to call them the Sustainable Development Goals. We're going to add 9 more goals. And we're going to really start taking this out to the world and trying to sell this to all of the folks engaged in trying to solve a lot of the world's problems as a model for how to get there and how to be more effective. And this is what I like so much about this whole program. It's a framework for actually creating targets and accountability, not only for the global body, but now for all of our local bodies as well, because the realization has been we can't achieve the global goals for the world unless we achieve them one community at a time. So the whole program that we've got going now is called Local 2030. And that's basically saying, let's find ways to achieve these goals within our communities by 2030. And let's get people involved who can make a difference to agree on this model of here's our problems, here's some targets. Now let's start creating plans to get there. So that's the whole idea behind it and what's sort of drawn me in. Just quick history. So again, 1945, we started this in San Francisco, the US did. It was a little bit short-lived, this, unity, bring the world together, because in the early 1950s, as you all know, that's when our motto changed. That's when we lost in God, in God we trust came in. That's when under God came into the pledge. And that's when McCarthyism took over and this whole Cold War basically, and things changed. And really, we're still not back to where we were and where we need to be as a country in promoting this. But if you look at what are the main purposes of the UN, well, it got established certainly to end all wars and to maintain international peace and security and to promote economic and social development. What does that mean? Wars get caused mostly because of problems that are happening in the world, whether it's hunger, poverty, economic issues, whatever, that lead to dictators, that lead to difficult situations coming in. So there's a need to solve these problems, and that'll help us make the world safer and prevent wars and stuff. And that promotes human rights. I mean, that's why the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is so key. There's 193 nations that belong and all subscribe. What has the United Nations accomplished? A lot. And I'm not going to go through everything, but look at the peacekeeping force that they have with over 100,000 peacekeeping troops currently fighting in 14 different skirmishes around the world, trying to keep the peace in these areas and to contain things, trying to create mediations and settlements. We know about the COVID assistance, protects and promotes human rights globally throughout 80 treaties and declarations through their International Court of Justice. You've got support of maternal health, helping more than 1 million women a month overcome pregnancy risks. I mean, it's an endless amount of things that the UN does. And we're looking today at our current situations. We know that climate clearly is a huge issue. We know that social justice is a big issue, growing globally. And we know that food shortages and other kinds of crises that are coming up through all the tragedies, the floods, the earthquakes, and everything that are happening. A lot of folks kick in, but nobody kicks in more than the UN on these kinds of things. And so the United Nations Association itself really is a nonprofit entity separate from the UN. There's versions of it globally. In the United States, it actually was the organization of citizens that helped create the UN in the first place, because it started back in World War I with the League of Nations, which didn't then succeed politically, but the citizens groups stayed together and helped convince Roosevelt to start the UN. in 1998 in the US, they were running into some financial issues. Ted Turner at the time had just sold CNN and invested $1 billion into bringing life back into the UNA organization in the US and merged it under the UN Foundation, created the United Nations Foundation, and it, along with another outfit called the Better World Campaign, comprised the largest network of UN advocates. The thing I love about UNA, one of the things I love the most about it, other than that it's a very targeted, action-oriented, goal-oriented organization, is that it's got over 20,000 members. Over half of them are young, 26 or younger. And that doesn't include many of the youth that are involved in our campus chapters that are literally all over the place. We've got Model UN programs where they teach kids the Model UN in high schools everywhere and in colleges. We're scrambling to just try to even catch up with how many programs are out there and get engaged with these so we can create better linkages to the community work. So it's pretty exciting organization to be involved in, and that led me to join the organization a couple years ago. I became vice president, and currently I've been president of the United Nations Orange County chapter. It's just a delight and a privilege to be a part of this effort. Again, working with so many people, talk about diversity. Louie, we certainly do have people in the UN that come from all over the world. They're very interested, of course, in the refugee issues and other issues. So it's got a lot of diversity in it. It's got a lot of youth in it. It's got a lot of enthusiasm and things that I know many of us in our secular groups would like to have. So again, I'm sort of encouraging us all to get engaged with our local UNA chapters. Find out about them, go to the websites, and see what you can do to become engaged. Just in Orange County, these are some of the key issues we're facing here. And so in our local 2030 program, we're going to be basically looking at a lot of these issues. And the goal then is to just work with 4 key constituencies here. It's getting government on board, local officials, and getting them to agree that, yep, this is a program we need to sign on to. And then you want to, and by the way, the city of Los Angeles is one of the largest success stories and advocates of this program. Mayor Eric Garcetti is a huge fan of the Sustainable Development Goals. If you go to LA City's website, most of their initiatives are linked to Sustainable Development Goals. So they're a model. San Diego is about ready as a city to adopt the Sustainable Development Goal model. In Orange County, we have 34 cities. None of the cities have adopted the model. That's our goal, is to make that happen. What we do have is the Orange County Business Council. And that's pretty exciting because the business community is another key segment that really needs to get on board and embrace this model so that we can all start working together. And then we want the academic communities working on research, identifying where are we on our issues, helping us set these targets and helping us set metrics to achieve success year by year and to measure things. What I love about it too is that it really kind of sets up a report card for government officials. How are we doing on our goals for homelessness, for trafficking, for income inequality, for housing, for all these other issues? How are we doing? Okay, well, if we're not doing good enough, then maybe we need other officials coming in. So I love that whole idea. So again, I mean, the UN and the UN Association remains, in my view, I still think it is one of the most important opportunities for getting everybody together. The 17th development goal is we can't obtain the goals without collaboration. So partnerships and collaboration is the goal. We're sort of living that here with the coalition. You know, what Debbie has done with her coalition building and all of the coalition work that's happening throughout the national organizations, that's exactly what this is. We have to all work together. You know, that's the story. And so we all love John Lennon's Imagine, but he says it, you know, imagine all the people living life in peace. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will live as one. And the mantra of think globally, act locally is a mantra I really like. You know, I would encourage you to check out the UN Association wherever you can. There's a website right there, una@usa.org. And again, I'll be in one of the breakouts too and would be happy to answer questions. Thanks.
Great, Dave. Thank you so much. There's so much overlap between the Sustainable Development Goals and humanism principles. Great to know another place that we can get involved. With that, we're going to move into Rhett introducing the next section, which is we've been getting a fire hose of information all day. on service, on community, on activism, all of this education. And we wanted to give participants an opportunity to share what they've learned, look at what they're taking away. And so, Rhett, I'll turn it over to you to introduce this segment.
Thank you, Judy. And I have to give credit for this case model that I'm going to introduce to Kevin Bowling and Secular Student Alliance. They shared this with us a while back, and we kind of adopted it with the Humanist Association of Orange County. The nice thing about this model is that it's so easy to understand, but it certainly takes some time and strategy potentially to implement it in your organization. So CASE simply stands for Community, Advocacy, Service, and Education. Again, this is from Secular Student Alliance, Kevin Bowling again. Let us borrow this slide. And we've kind of adopted it for our Humanist Association. And basically the same thing, just having this model as a framework for our mission and goals. So the idea is to have some kind of a balance here. And a balance doesn't necessarily mean 25% each. It's going to really depend on the goals and mission of your organization, but maybe to have at least try to have a little bit of each of these things in your organization would be helpful. And so most of us do pretty good with education. We have lectures, presentations, discussions. If you think about some of our counterparts, like churches, for example, they usually do pretty well in all of these areas. You've got your weekly sermons, you've got a sense of community, people coming together. This is something that we need as well. And then as Louie and others talked about, advocacy, making policy change, this is super important. And then service, being a service to the community, that's always important too, to get our name out there and be effective and helpful in our community. So we've tried to put at least something in each one of these buckets. And if we don't have the resources to necessarily do that, that's where the partner organizations come in. If we don't have a lot of people able to do certain things, we can certainly partner with other organizations, say, hey, let us send a few of our volunteers to your food bank or whatever. So again, the simplicity is easy to understand. So the CASE model is obviously great for leaders to ask, hey, what programs should we have? How can we maybe balance things out a little bit better? But if it's also great for members to say, hey, what areas might I want to get involved with? So you can say, hey, I noticed that your group doesn't have a lot of service opportunities, or you've got no advocacy. I would like to be an advocate with city council or with education or whatever. That's a great way for you to get involved and help out your local organizations. The slide that I shared earlier was the one I share with our humanist group every month, trying to encourage people to think about this. And we always bring up this list of volunteer opportunities. We're in desperate need for more help to get some of these programs running. I'm sure some of you are as well. And we just offer a wide variety of volunteer opportunities to try to get filled. And you can see some of the things that we've been involved with in the past or that we offer for our community.
Everybody's going to basically have an opportunity to have a small group discussion on all three topics, on community, on advocacy, and on service, okay?
Yeah, guys, this was great. You guys did such a great job there. It was so diverse. My goodness, it was just extremely diverse, and every single speaker, even the ones that had short speeches, I just enjoyed greatly. So congrats to Dave and Rhett, man. You guys are kings in my view.
Well, this was a whole group effort, the whole team here. Judy, David, Paul, Margaret, the whole team. But thanks, Bruce.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming and participating.